Luckily, I got the easiest task tonight. I get to talk about gold mining. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Holmes. I'm working as a consultant for Piedmont Environmental Council. But prior to April, I worked for PEC for 22 years. Matter of fact, cut my teeth in Orange County as the Orange County field representative back in 2002, I believe it was when I started. And then progressed in the organization and held the position of Director of State Policy prior to my departure. Unfortunately, I have the most, I guess, robust collective knowledge with regard to some of the mining history on the site, so I've been called out of retirement to come talk to you a little bit about this, critical issue. So this is the site. Again, you can see right here, let me find my little pointer. Yes. This is the proposed realignment through the congressional boundary of the Wilderness Park, perfectly lining up with where their major entrance is for what their proposed development would be. Moving the old alignment of Route 20 here up to here and increasing, I'm sure, the value of that property. There's also another road project in back, if you want to take a look at what Fredericksburg area metropolitan planners are wanting to accomplish with connecting Route 3 to Route 95, that happens to line up with that backside of this property right here, also under ownership of the same LLC that is proposing this development, or group of owners, I should say. Anyway, let's talk about what happened in the past. So, as early as, I'll just say early 1800s, a lot of mining activity occurred in this area. If you'll notice, this is a map from, I want to say 1978, 1979, then the Virginia Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy. Now they're called the Virginia Department of Energy. Regardless, same agency. This is a map from about 1978 in which they pinpointed the location of all the mining that had occurred in Orange County. You'll notice that red circle is pretty much the property we're talking about. The vast majority of these mines are on that property. These are some of the remnants that you can still see today on site. That's a shaft. There are at least 2 mines that had operable shafts on the property. That's a concern not just from a safety hazard falling down a shaft, it's also a concern of underground collapsing of these tunnels and these shafts and what that would do with regard to road infrastructure or housing if it's built on top of those old shafts. So having an understanding of what's going on under the ground is almost as important as what's going on above the ground. Speaking of what's going on above the ground, let's talk about it. Right here, this is right within the property line that we're talking about. This is one of the most significant clusters of gold mining activity in Virginia. Matter of fact, one of those dots is the Vaucluse mine. More gold was extracted from that mine than any other gold mine in Virginia. Now, when I asked the question of the Department of Energy staff who's in charge of reclaiming these mines, is it safe for me to assume that because more gold was extracted from this mine than any other gold mine in Virginia, that more mercury was used at this site for the processing of that gold than any other mine in Virginia? His answer was yes. Now, what do we know about that? The tailings pond for this mine was right here. This is their proposed reservoir, one of them. This is the other one. These are the most significant mines, and I'll show you a LiDAR map that will show you that the ground disturbing activity occurred from that point all the way to the river. Also, another important cluster of mines on the southern portion of the property. This mine, you can still see the tailings pond from aerial photos, but you'll notice that those mines extend down. Each one of these little pick and shovels, and this map is on PEC, you can go there and view it, is one of those mine sites I was talking about. Some of them occur in the area that's privately held by this developer that they want to realign the property through. Anytime you're talking about running a road or doing development in an area where past mining has occurred and no reclamation has occurred, you're talking about the potential to disturb the contamination or the constituents that are resulted or that are left over from the mining process. So what did we find when we dug into what information existed about these mines? Well, we looked at the mine summary reports that, again, are on DOE's website. This is all public information. If you want to just view some of these documents, I know Piedmont Environmental Council has them up on their website. More than happy for you to take a look. You can read them for yourself. But you'll notice Vaucluse mine is one of the more significant ones, and we're going to talk about what we found within those reports. Notice this. This is from the Vaucluse mine. investigate inclusion in the Superfund cleanup. Has anybody ever heard of the EPA Superfund cleanup program? That's what they're talking about. That's how bad that one mine is. And we'll get into what the issue is when we start talking about how much mercury was used. You'll see here that 0.29 parts per million is what they normally expect. When they see levels of that, they're already thinking about having to go in and clean up that level of mercury, because that's going to cause a problem. At that Vaucluse site, we'll talk about what they found when they measured back in 1988 and 1990, the last time mercury samples were taken from these ponds that are still yet unreclaimed. Look at this. Extreme mercury contamination from the sediment of the tailings pond. Likely groundwater contamination from the use of mercury in the mining process. Large array of underground workings. Right here, potential groundwater contamination due to open shafts. Fatal fall hazards. Let's see here. Residential being increased, noting that they were actually seeing houses being built near these mines and recognizing it as a potential issue in the future. Houses appeared to be on wells on the road the site is on. That's still the case today. And I don't even know if the residents that live out there have actually had their wells tested. But I know that if I lived out there with my 2 daughters, I'd be testing the water. Needless to say, mercury, not good for the human body. Neither is cyanide. By the way, they use cyanide on that site too. Here's that little cluster I just talked about. This was one of their original development proposals laid right on top of the old mining. Now, what's interesting about this map, you'll see the topography looks really weird. That's called LiDAR. So when you can go in, you can actually see underneath the tree canopy and see all the ground disturbance that's occurred. Well, let's just take a close look at that site. You'll start to see these little, looks like little trenches and pits all throughout there. That actually lines up perfectly from this map. I believe this is late 1890s, if I'm not mistaken, which actually plots out where all the shafts ran from the Vaucluse mine. Just one of the mines that had shafts on it. We can perfectly overlay that on top of that same LiDAR image. You see all these big pits right there? Those are all marked workings of the Vaucluse mine. These maps line up perfectly. This stuff is still the way it was back in 1939, the last time they took a spoonful of dirt out of this mine. Matter of fact, interesting side note, Henry Ford owned this mine for 2 years back in, I think it was 1914. Went in, stole some of the equipment. It's now in a mining museum up in Michigan. Also, another map, 1847. This is of the Vaucluse mine. You'll notice a dam right here. You'll notice this right there. That is the actual mill. That's where they process the mercury. Gold mining in Virginia is not like gold mining out west. It's deep in the rock. They have to crush that rock. They have to then use mercury to pull the gold tailings or fines out of that rock, crushed rock. The way they would do it is they'd mix it all in a big vat, and they'd use low-stack coal-fired burners, and they'd burn this stuff. And you not only had deposition of mercury emissions from the air deposition just from burning it, they recaptured a lot, reused it too. But you also had, again, accidents that occurred around the site. From one of the notes that we found back in, I want to say 1830, late 30s, they actually lost 6,000 pounds of mercury one day somewhere out there. That's just one day. And that's not to mention the mercury they actually were using to extract this. So you see this map, that's interesting, right? Oh yeah, you see where all the stuff is? Well, guess what? This is that area right there. And it all lines up. We know exactly where these things are, but we can't get on site to test it because it's in private property. And these are what are known as orphaned mine sites, abandoned mine sites. So unless that owner allows the state agency on the property, there's nothing the state agency can do about it. This is why you've heard some of us say, hey, before you do anything on this site, consider any development on this site, the applicant, the landowner, should be entering into the voluntary remediation program with the Department of Environmental Quality. Right now, the only proffer statement, the only statement that's in the proffers that has anything to do with mine reclamation has to do with working with DOE, Department of Energy. Guess what DOE will tell you when you ask them whether or not they're going to handle this? They say, we don't handle environmental contamination. We deal with the remediation of the site. That's basically closing the shafts and all that. But DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, is the one that's expected to deal with this. So, also, just an extra area, interest. These are all these dots. Those are where the shafts are along those workings. You'll notice right here is the Rapidan River. This line of workings goes all the way to the river. Oh, I forgot to mention, back in 2008, 9, maybe 10, that segment of the Rapidan River was listed as impaired for mercury. Don't know how it got there. No clue. And unfortunately, without being able to get up in there and test, right now what we're hearing from DEQ is until the landowner enters into this program, we can't do anything. I would suggest that might be slightly off. So let me just end by saying a few things. One, I think I've already said the first, the applicant should join the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality's voluntary remediation program. They should receive a certificate from the state saying that this thing has been cleaned up. Orange County shouldn't do anything, definitely not act favorably on this, until that certificate has been issued from the state. Otherwise, they're going to be left partly liable for this conversation. Orange County's been offered, they were offered a school site and parks and everything as a part of this rezoning. Guess where the school site was up until about 2 months ago? I've heard they've resubmitted another application. I've heard they moved it. It was right on top of that tailings pit I showed you. And they were trying to get Orange County to accept that as a school site. I should stop there. I won't. One last thing. Let's see. Fully reclaimed. Oh, yeah. The county, and I hope all of you, would pursue additional state and or federal action related to the ongoing off-site contamination. Because while I understand that the state needs permission to enter a property in order to do this cleanup, if contamination is occurring off-site, it's my belief they have a responsibility to all of you, to any resident of the Commonwealth, given that they're in charge of protecting our waters, protecting the health and safety and welfare of Virginia residents, for making sure this isn't ongoing. This has been an open wound since 1940. Like I said, the last spoon of dirt that was taken out of this mine, 1939. And we're still left with this today. The tailings pit for Vaucluse mine is 60 feet deep and currently in the middle of the third branch of Shotgun Run. So the stream runs through the tailings pond. In the remediation plans that were offered by Department of Energy, they're talking about capping that in place and rerouting the stream around it because there's nothing else they can do with it. So this isn't little. This is, again, the largest gold mine contaminated site in Virginia. And I really hope we can get the state to actually do something about it. But I do know that you, as residents of Orange County, can get the Orange County Board of Supervisors to stop and pay attention to this issue. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you so much.